Due to the ignorance of our host, parental discretion is advised.
Welcome back to How Did It Get So Good? My guest today, I've been wanting to have you for a while now, and I've been giving back stories to every guest that I've been having lately. I came across a story of you, Richard, by the way, with Utah Stories. Thank you so much for coming. You're making my week.
Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
So I came across a story and we'll touch on that here in a little bit, but I was blown away. And the reason why it caught my attention was because the video that I was watching is literally right outside our building. And I was in the bar in the corner and all that stuff.
Oh, and there was an encampment out here. Yeah.
Yeah.
Right
so I was
here.
like, oh, like that's us. That's like this right here. Mm-hmm. And but anyway, how are you, man? Just nice meeting you.
Yeah, good to meet you
I've
too.
been talking to
Allegra.
That's what it is. Yeah.
Yeah, things are good. I think that you kind of do what you do to make a living, and then you'd have to do also what you do that fulfills your passion.
Yeah.
And the podcast and the videos, we have a revenue director. They don't make any money.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Oh, yeah. I know all about that.
In fact, they might detract from us making money because I spend so much time on it. But I absolutely love it, and it's covering the homeless situation in downtown Salt Lake and seeing and asking tough questions, how and why things are the way they are, and how they're only getting worse. Mm-hmm. Talking to homeless people about that has just become my passion. And I find that I have to earn money and kind of save it up and then get back to doing that when I have my bank account looking okay. And so, but it's just become something like I think when you get away from it for too long and you get back into your city mindset of thinking about, generate revenue, more sales, more money, you realize that, if you don't scratch that itch of what you're passionate about, I think you're more likely to go in the wrong direction and spend your free time maybe drinking too much or watching too many videos or distracting yourself. And so, I've kind of used it as a platform to encourage people also to follow their passion to do, what fulfills you.
When I was telling you a little bit of the story of the show, I used to do it with a friend of mine. He decided to leave, and I was like, okay, I'm gonna turn this into something that I really want, because my plan was to either keep that and then start my own thing. But since he was like, he's a father, a husband. He's also my boss. Like I was telling you what I do for a living. He's my direct boss. Mm-hmm. So even when I've told you I have the pressure of being in the office, he's my boss, so it's double the pressure. So he was like, I think I'm done. I was like, all right, cool. But then the thing just started clicking. I go, okay, now I can do whatever. But it is just like you say. I go home after staring at my computer at work for 10 hours. Then I go home and I do it for another 2 or 3, just to make a little clip or put together an episode. And and then some people go like, but are you like getting all the money? I'm like, no, not really. But I just love sitting down with people and just talking. And honestly, the way I've been explaining it lately is the questions are like on the top of my head, just from straight ignorance. Mm-hmm. I don't want to prepare nothing. I just want to be like, hey, explain this to me.
Yeah,
like,
I found
put
that
it
too.
Together.
It's way better if it's organic. It's just a conversation.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
like when you prepare all the questions, it feels like a TV program or something. It doesn't feel like the podcast arena.
I was talking to a finances lady, and all that stuff is like, for them, it's just so easy. But for me, being as dumb as I am, I'm like, hey, I need you to dumb it down for me. And she was like, well, this, and that. And I go, oh, it makes total sense. But I don't go into an episode being like, this is how I'm going to attack it. This is the direction I'm going to go. But with that being said, this is going to be all over the place. But no, I came across one of your stories. This is about, I want to say 2 years ago. And it was funny because two people sent it to me from different backgrounds or different circles of friends. They sent it to me, and I was like, oh, I just watched this, by the way. And it was a story of, once again, related to the homeless community. And it was about someone being out there hurting the community, for lack of better words, murdering people from the community. And the story was, for what was kind of being played, was there was an interview with the lady, and she kind of insinuated that this person keeps getting arrested, but then he gets to be, he gets to they let him go again, and therefore these things keep happening. So obviously, in my head, and I came across this when I was doing the other show, so our brains just started just flying everywhere, and we're like, how is this even possible? Is this a real thing? So ever since that day, about 2 years ago, I was like, I would love to sit down with that person and just go deep on this.
That video, those couple of videos we did on YouTube about every person I was talking to on the streets kept saying the same thing. There's a serial killer. They're going around the Jordan River. They're killing people and they're getting away with it. And the bodies are piling up. And tried to talk to the police for months on end, trying to talk to the cops. Is this happening? Is it not happening? Can you discredit it? Cops would not want to talk to me about it. I kept grandma requesting they wouldn't talk. And you get to a point where you're very frustrated as a reporter trying to find the truth. So I reported what 6 separate homeless people told me. I wasn't able to verify it, but my headline was, is there a serial killer on the loose murdering homeless people? And I framed it as a question. I did an interview with my friend who's an investigative journalist. He actually did a story for City Weekly showing that a man had been murdered and his murder had not been investigated. It was a homeless man, and the police admitted, yeah, he was murdered. But then he pointed out the murder was not investigated. So I had him on the podcast. I had 6 other sources, and I reported it. And then I got completely attacked by the establishment media and the police department. The police department said, this hack reporter says, this is happening. It's not. Then all the other media, KUTV News reporter said, what do you think you're doing? You call yourself a reporter. You never verified it. And I got really discredited by all the other local media establishment, where for years I've been a reporter, and I think we've had pretty good credibility. And I'm like, I reported what the homeless people were telling me. And I think if 6 people tell you that, it's not an uncredible testimony. Like, people want to discredit the testimony of homeless people. I didn't want to do that. Like, why should it be uncredible? And then I had another woman who had a connection with the coroner's office, and the actual mortuary company doing these, taking in these bodies. And she said, the bodies are coming in. She said, I have a connection there. They're coming in, and there's a lot of people being murdered, and they're not being investigated. But I could not ever get the police department to give me the records about murders of homeless people, because, as they said, that is not a classification of a homicide victim. So they don't classify their housing status when they are putting them in a police record. So therefore, they cannot search that database for those records. And it was really disheartening, because you try to get down to the truth, and then the police department says, we can't tell you the truth. In LA County, they have a status for a housing status for the victims of homicides. So they track the murders of homeless people. We don't have that in Salt Lake City. And I'm like, why not? Why can't we have that status? And I never got any answers. I never got any. The PR director of the Salt Lake City Police Department was obviously putting up walls rather than wanting to answer questions. I had to grandma request 3 times over a year just to find out how many homeless people who were in permanent supportive housing had died from overdoses. And then I finally got a number. I finally got the reports after I threatened to go public with my video showing I had gone through all this emails. I showed all the emails in a Camtasia video. They were not answering me. They would not answer. They would not give me fulfill my request. If I hired an attorney, I could sue them. And I said, this is my next step. I'm hiring an attorney. I'm going to sue you. Finally, they come up with some records. And then according to my inside source, they were incomplete. And so, but I can't prove that because I obviously don't have access to the database. But it's troubling because the police department just does not want to be transparent about this problem.
And is this being overlooked just because of the fact that they're from the homeless community? Is that why they're like, nah?
Yeah, I think that the problem is this: you have a certain percentage of the homeless population who are addicted to drugs, who are in a complete downward spiral, who they've gone through drug treatment in and out. They've gone into the homeless shelters in and out, and we're not getting these people recovered. They're not recovering. They don't want to recover, and for all intents and purposes, society no longer wants to deal with these people. And if they die, so be it. And they think those are the people being murdered. They are not the people being murdered. The ones being murdered are, from what I could tell, they're people who've recently become homeless. One woman we profiled who had been murdered had, and I should say allegedly murdered, because the person who was closest to her at the time of her death was never convicted, was never investigated, really, was let off. But her name was Candace, and her mother and father came on our podcast. She had been in and out of homelessness, but she wasn't chronically homeless. She wasn't a chronic drug addict. She didn't deserve to die and to be essentially murdered. And so it's like, I think, trying to tell these individual stories and point out these aren't the dregs of society who are dying. These are our brothers, our sisters, our fathers, mothers, and they deserve compassion. They deserve help, and that's kind of the message we wanted to get out.
What's the actual truth about the community? Because in some parts of it looks like, so they used to be out here, right outside of our building, and I remember one time we came in to do an episode, and there were actual cops literally kicking them out. There was a van that showed up with trailers. They were throwing all the tents in the trailer, and it was like, hey, grab your stuff and get out, or we're gonna do it for you.
Yeah. But
on the other hand, there is like and you guys have a bunch of stories about this on your Instagram. It seems like, on the other hand, there's a bunch of buildings that are getting put up just because, for the benefit of the homeless community. So what's happening? Is this helping in a way? Because is there a way to get rid of it? I don't think so, right?
No. And what I've concluded is, unfortunately, there's the ladder we all know, the ladder you climb, the socioeconomic ladder that you rise up to get to the top, make a good living, have a comfortable life, one step at a time. You probably started at the very bottom with your construction business. You had to go through all these steps before you got where you are. But then I notice now there's a ladder going down too. Yeah. And the people at the very bottom are being incentivized much more to take the ladder going down than they are to take the ladder going up. The ladder going down is, when you've been on the streets for 3 years, you go to the top of the list for free housing. So hang in there. You've been homeless for 2 years. Stay in that tent. Don't worry about your drug addiction. You'll get your housing eventually. Because now, today, when I go out and talk to homeless people, the first thing that comes out of their mind when I talk about housing is they don't say, oh, I need to get this job so I can get into housing, or I need to get my my shit together, clean up, and get. They're saying I'm on the list for housing, and what that means is once they've proven themselves chronically homeless long enough, they then become disabled, which is a new classification. If you're chronically homeless for long enough, you are classified as disabled, which enables you to an SSDI check, Social Security Disability. 30% of that check goes to your housing, and then you don't have to have a job for the rest of your life.
Yeah.
And so that ladder going down is attracting a lot of people, which is creating the supply, their demand, I should say. And then the housing, the homeless industrial complex, which a lot of people are getting wealthy off of, which we just pointed out, is creating that housing, which is the supply for the demand. So they create the demand by telling people, no, you can't work. You're not capable of working. You really need to, self-medicate if you need to. We understand. And then if you just stick out being, self-medicating, being, nursing your disability, you get the classification disability, you'll get onto your free housing.
How are these communities growing? Is that because more people, like you just said about the ladder, is that more people deciding to do the home? First of all, is homeless the right word? Are we calling them unhoused? What are we doing?
I call them homeless. I mean, so you have the difference is you have people who are temporarily homeless, and nobody's a homeless person. That's kind of a derogatory statement. Yeah. But there are homeless people. Yeah. I mean, it's obviously you say it with compassion. You're a person who's experiencing homelessness. That's a big mouthful of words. Yeah. But everybody's a person experiencing homelessness. And but yeah, there's a homeless community out there, and what I'm learning in interviewing a lot of these people is maybe 70% are from Utah, and about 30 to 40% are from outside of Utah, shipped here from other places where they say, oh, you got to go to Salt Lake. They have better resources. There's a big story about Jackson Hole shipping all of their homeless to Salt Lake. Other communities just think that, we've got it figured out here, so just send them here.
Because my question was going to be, are they people deciding to go that route, or like you just pointed out, people are coming in because of the benefits or being homeless or whatever it is, or my worry was, are these guys procreating? Are these guys having kids?
It is. I mean, intergenerational poverty is definitely real, and what I find is the common demographic is broken homes. I mean, most everybody who is on the street came from either a broken home with domestic violence, with abuse, with lack of family unity, or raised in a single parent household where either their mother, father both died, or one of them died and drug overdose, whatever. But it's like that nuclear family is dissolving, as we know. It's not nearly as strong as it was 30 years ago. So that is definitely a major reason for it.
I was watching one of your videos before you came in, and I think you had Rocky Anderson on your show, and he was talking about that there was a decrease on the drug department in the homeless communities. But then again, he said if you go to the station, isn't that what he said? The station that's around here. What is it called? The Rio Grande.
Oh, yeah.
He said you can actually see it with your naked eyes, that this is happening. This is a real thing. Is that, are they to a level when they're doing it and not because of the same situation with the cops just not investing time in there or not necessarily paying attention? Does that make them go, well, then we're going to clearly do operations here?
Yeah, the way the police department is operating now, in conjunction with the mayor's office, it can't be ignored that the mayor is the one directing the police department. She has discretion over the department to tell them what she wants, what policies she wants in place. Is you have anytime there's an encampment, they'll give them 24 to 48 hours to leave. They rarely tell them where they can go because all the shelters are full right now.
Yeah.
It's a horrible situation for the people who are out there because this is the only place they found where they can stay. I was at North Temple under the bridge where the Jordan River is, interviewing people, and they had a really nice little camp there, but garbage was piling up. And they said, yeah, the cops said we got 40 hours to leave. We don't know where we're going to go. They didn't tell us where we can go. So you imagine, you're recently homeless. You get a little bit of a sense of security by finding a bridge you can stay under to be out from under the elements. Mm-hmm. And then the cops come in and say, you got to take off. Sorry. Yeah. And they don't tell you where to go. And all they say is you can't be here. And I hear that story over and over again. So it's this lack of compassion combined with this idea that, do this long enough, you'll get free housing. It's, of course, only going to make the problem worse. And more people, if you imagine trying to have a full-time job while you're homeless, how are you going to get cleaned up?
Yeah.
The showers don't open at St. Vincent's till, I think, 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock in the morning. You can't, if you're not staying at a homeless shelter, it's impossible.
Yeah.
How
does the homeless shelter work? I know that there's for what I know, it gets to a point in the day when they're about to open the doors. Obviously, I could be completely wrong about this. They open the doors, and then whoever's in line, whoever gets a room, then he gets to, spend a night in the room. But what happens the next day? Do they get, for lack of a better words, kicked out until that afternoon?
Yeah.
Or once you get a room, then you're set? How does that work?
You have to show up before a certain time, and I want to say it's like 8 p.m. If you're any later than 8 p.m., you lose your spot. And I wish I knew more of the details because I think it depends on the shelter that you're in.
Okay.
There's the Men's Resource Center that's Gail Miller, which is by the ballpark.
Oh, okay.
And then there's the Women's Center, which is the Gerald E. King, and that one was sad. We looked at it 2 years ago. All the most mentally ill women are getting kicked out because they're preventing all the women in there from sleeping because they'll scream out at night. They engage in crazy exhibitions of masturbation and stuff.
Is that the story you guys put up about the deteriorating building, and you guys were like on the stairs going up and down, and there was like you guys were like I think it was
the Magnolia. That was a different one. That was
okay.
one of the permanent supportive housing units that we've been reporting on. That place is crazy. That opened up like 4 years ago, brand new, quartz countertops, beautiful apartments. Celebrated because it was going to give the homeless people who were going to be going in there dignity of having a beautiful apartment. And what's happening? All night drug parties, rooms are getting trashed, people are ODing on drugs constantly. That's the one my grandma requested the info about how many people had died, and I got nothing for a long time. Eight people had died there as of September last year. I was told another 5 to 8 people have died since then. But I have sources in that building who, both managers and tenants, who say it's just nonstop. They're smoking crystal meth, they're smoking all sorts of drugs all day, and people can't stand to be in the facility because it's so full of the aroma of drugs. And so it's just a horrible situation. It's this beautiful building that's just getting totally trashed, and nobody's reporting on it. And I think there's this level where the local media just doesn't want to report on the facts and the truth because I think they're afraid to piss off the wrong people, because a lot of this is sustained and financed by the elites in Utah. Like obviously the Gail Miller shelter. Gail Miller gave a ton of money to that. The Magnolia was launched by Pamela Atkinson and the mayor. but the whole neighborhood around it is completely deteriorated because people in there are using drugs all day, every day. They're not getting the wraparound services. But
how do you get do you get intel by the community?
yeah, a lot of people
Do
come
you?
forward now because they know I'm interested in the truth.
Okay. So
They
you're
know.
you're well known with the community. Then.
Well, it's like I put these videos up, these of interviews with homeless people.
And I was gonna ask you, do they have phones? Do they
Most of them, yeah.
really?
Uh-huh. Yeah,
So
most
just
of them are
watching
watching the
YouTube on
videos.
you?
Yeah, a lot. It's kind of interesting. A lot of them know who I am when I show up. They know I'm giving them a fair shake, and I'm
Nice.
gonna be legit with them. And yeah, it's a couple of times I've showed up, and they're like, "Oh yeah, we've watched your videos," and it's kind of neat because I think a lot of people are out to exploit the homeless.
Yeah.
And kind of use them for whatever purposes. I was interviewing somebody last week, and this woman shows up in this big white SUV, and she's watching, and she asked the homeless guy while I'm interviewing, "Do you know this man?" And he goes, "No." And then after I was done, she's like, "What are you doing out here?" And I said, "I'm doing what I usually do. I'm interviewing the homeless people." And she's like, I was like, where are you from?" And she had the CDL licensing business across the street on North Temple. And I said, "I interviewed you like 2.5 years ago. I remember you."
Oh,
she's like, "Oh yeah, you're that guy." But I think that she was worried that I'm some kind of maybe wannabe pimp. I don't know, trying to recruit people. But because a lot of people victimize the homeless, they find that they can just go up to them and say, "Hey, you want $100? Let's make a business," or something like that.
There was a point in time I thought about having somebody from the community here in the show. This is years ago. Going back to like I've had this idea of doing my own thing for a while now, and like having a person from the community, from the homeless community, was like a thing that I always thought about. Because obviously I feel like I can sit down and just ask them a bunch of questions, right? Because again, I think we get blinded by the fact that all the what do you call it, like the stereotypical thoughts that you get, oh, they're on drugs, or they're violent, or they're dirty, or they're this or they're that, and I had a friend that I've had here a few episodes ago, and he had to work with the community in a group that is not longer around, and he said he was the one, the first person that told me, says they're normal people, they're actually happy people for the majority of the time, and just like you, they used to get, there was one lady that they used to I guess everybody knows, and she would know where the community is and who is where, and so when they try to find her, they will go to this group of people and say, "Hey, where's so and so?" And then they'll be like, "Oh, she's just right out here," and so that's how they will get their information. They were related to human trafficking. This is a couple years ago, I think. But he was the one that was explaining to me. He says, "No, people actually want to talk to you. People actually they welcome the fact that it's like, hey, what's going on?" And but now that you mentioned, I'm gonna give him like $100 or something. I always thought, what if I just offer like a meal?
Yeah.
And just say, would you just come and sit down with me?
I pay for interviews. I mean, this dude I talked to, he's going to be in the story we're having releasing on Friday in the magazine. His name's Kevin. He's a black guy he was on the corner of right across the street from the ballpark. And I was like, "Can I get your story?" And he's like, "How much?" I said, "Well, how much do you want?" He's like, $20. I was like, "If I can do a video recording, absolutely, $20. No, I don't want my face." And so, I gave him $10, and but he told me a great story, I of course want to give. I hook him up with meals and with cash, and I feel like it's a great exchange. I want to hear your story.
Yeah.
I want to be compassionate too, and I feel like this particular man was absolutely somebody I wanted to speak with, because he epitomized what the severity of the lack of affordable housing represents. He was an older gentleman, African American, on the corner. I mean, I know what they're doing. It's mostly drug trade stuff, and but he's doing what he has to do to survive. And I was like, when was the last time you had a home? And he said it was 4 years ago. I was living out in Eagle Mountain. I had a job, $15 an hour. I could afford my rent. Then I had to move out of my apartment, and I could not afford rent anymore. I was priced out of the housing market. And I said, so you've been out here for 4 years. What's your plan? How can you get off the street? He's like, I don't know. He said, eventually, maybe I'll get Social Security disability like everybody else.
$15 an hour, and he has an apartment at
I think he was living with his sister. I think he might have said that, but he couldn't afford anything.
Yeah, for sure.
Can't afford anything.
Yeah.
And so I believe the solution is real market affordable housing, not the government making everybody into dependents. Why not offer $500-$600 housing, tiny apartments if they have to be, no parking? Maybe you just have access to a bicycle or transit. No. But why are we not solving the problem that way? Why instead are we creating this giant homeless industrial complex like they have in San Francisco, they have in LA, they have in Seattle, they have in Portland? Why are we mimicking the programs we know fail? Yeah. Because people are getting rich. Because there's a whole administrative class of people who love those $150,000 to $250,000 salaries because they're solving the problem. And so that whole class of people need to be wiped out, and the market needs to solve this problem by just opening up zoning. If the cities along the Wasatch Front all had tiny home communities, say you've got to have 10 acres of tiny home communities, every city along the Wasatch Front, we could solve this problem overnight.
So is the community, speaking of the people that are making all the money and doing all this stuff, is the community being like a benefit for them? Like, do they actually benefit from the homeless community?
Yeah, because they are solving the problem using the only hammer in their toolbox, which is free housing. We're gonna say you're disabled. We're gonna say you have a irreparable disability, so you got to be in a free apartment. And the way you risk losing that apartment is showing you're not disabled, going out and get a job. The ones who are solving the problem, we've pointed out the ones who can actually solve the problem, they're not getting any federal money. The Other Side Academy has a 2-year program where people can come in. They get free room and board, but they have to work all day, every day, and they recover from their drug addictions or their past felonies or their misbehavior by working and learning the value of hard work and the dignity you get from work. And they're solving the problem, but they get $0 from the government. Same goes with SwitchPoint. It's a new model where everybody who's there has to work within the community, and everybody gets a job doing whatever it is they can do to the extent possible. But do you get dignity through work? You don't get dignity through housing, through a free house, or feeling like you're too worthless to ever work. There's no dignity in that. And so there's two models competing against each other right now. And the model that's clearly getting all the funding is the one that's absolutely failing. And so our messaging is we want more people to understand the nature of this problem, how the homeless people are being used as pawns, and the system that's failing is getting all the money and the majority of the homeless people buying into it. The system that's succeeding is getting almost no money, and it's getting those programs are not only not getting funding, they're getting admonished and criticized by the homeless industrial complex people. And
go ahead. Sorry,
well, no, it's just sad, and that truth is not getting out there because you have names like Pamela Atkinson, Gail Miller, the mayor, all going to the ribbon cutting ceremonies of the free permanent supportive housing solution, which is absolutely not working.
Being in construction, the construction industry, we feel like is getting hurt by the fact that now you go to a McDonald's and make $20+ an hour, right? Which is kind of what a labor with no experience makes. So someone can say, well, why would I go and bust my ass out there in the sun and the rain and the snow when I can just go and flip burgers for the same amount of money, right? That sounds to me like it's such an easy job to get. It's such an easy opportunity to make money. How come us having jobs that are that easy for that much money, how come we still have a homeless community and there's not like that motivation to say like, oh, maybe if I go there, I would at least have this much money to do whatever, or at least maybe not to live off of, but I will eat.
It's two things. It's like I said, once you're out on the streets, it's so hard to get cleaned up enough to have somebody at McDonald's want to hire you. That's A.
Makes sense.
But B is you have all these people telling you, look, you let's sign you up for housing, and in so many years you're going to get housing. And won't it be so much easier to get that job and to get off drugs once you have housing? You just have to stay out here long enough and prove you're chronically homeless or a chronic drug addict, and then you're disabled. So, like I said, that ladder pulling people down is way more appealing than somehow living on the streets. Maybe 3 months, you'd have to stockpile money while you're working at McDonald's, flipping burgers, get cleaned up, go to that job, somehow get enough money for your first month's rent, your deposit, whatever. I mean, that is way harder than getting clean, getting off drugs, living in a tent, not doing anything all day.
Yeah, it makes total sense. I want to take a side turn here before I forget. I want to talk a little bit about Utah stories. Is it, for what I see, it's a podcast. It's a book, if I'm not mistaken. I saw you on that video. Yeah, it's a magazine. Sorry, I saw you on that video putting your cover. It's also you guys are throwing your videos on YouTube and obviously on Instagram. Where did this come from? Who it was? You that started it. I kind of want to know a little bit of it.
Yeah, I if we go way back, I was a graphic designer. Then I became a computer programmer to pay my way through school. But I found that I did not want to study graphic design or computer programming. I want to study media, and I want to study journalism. And so I did that at the U, and I did that while working full time and paying my way through by computer programming. So I developed a website, and I called it Utah Stories. I started putting these videos out there and just seeing if people cared about local issues in depth. So I studied documentary film, and I thought, why not do like a documentary film treatment to a local story? And so we did, one of the first things I did was I got a big bag of burgers and a $5 bills. And I said, I'll trade you a burger or a $5 bill for your story in Pioneer Park. And that was, 20 years ago. And I was left with no $5 bills and a bag of burgers. So it was pretty funny. So I just handed everybody the burgers.
Yeah.
After that. And but the stories were so awesome, man. I love the candor, people who are living in that. It's called the lunatic fringe. You know, you're living in a lifestyle that's you're basically 1 foot in normal society, 1 foot in the weird lunatic society of the homeless world. And it's a very interesting part of society that I was fascinated with 20 years ago. And I always loved covering it. But, to make money doing something you love is a different thing. We had to create and monetize our content, and I couldn't believe it, but magazine was a great way to monetize our content. We found advertisers quite easily. We found businesses who we would present the voice of local Utah, your business story, tell it to us, we'll present it to the community. And we found that niche. And then I'd say, 10 years making decent money. It was fine. And then COVID hit. I lost everything. Almost all our advertisers. The business model wasn't viable. But we got the paycheck. We got the Paycheck Protection Program money. We got the relief money from COVID. I'm like, all right, I guess we'll print, every couple months. But we didn't have a viable business model because also printing costs doubled during COVID. And so at the same time, we were looking to get foster kids, and the foster kids showed up, 3 of them, right when COVID hit. So I had 3 foster kids, no viable way of making living through Utah Stories. I luckily have another business where I rent property. I've been fortunate enough to have parents who were in real estate. I bought properties, I rented out. So that's my next plan in life. Yeah, it's nice when you can pay off some homes and rent them out and give people affordable rent and stuff. Yeah, but so I was in the middle of COVID feeling pretty sorry for myself, and I don't think that's a particularly good way to go about living your life, pitying your own situation. And so I thought, well, I'm going to go interview more homeless people, so I don't feel bad about my situation. And that's something I encourage people to do. I think when you are involved in your own problems and your own, lack of maybe self-fulfillment, one of the best things you can do is talk to people who are even worse off than you are. I mean, who are having a much harder time than you are, because I have a family support system. I have a lot of people I can lean on. There's a lot of people who don't have that. And so I got back into the homeless coverage in the middle of COVID, and it immediately made me feel far better to think about their problems than to think about my own. And it helped me to understand the nature of the family unit and how strong, how lucky people are to have that family support, and how our society should really be promoting that more than anything. You don't need a free apartment nearly as much as you need community. And I think that's the missing part of the equation. And so as I would go out and talk to these people, we had these kids, we were struggling with them because they all came from a really rough background. I started to gain insight into their situation because they had come from a situation where their mom and dad were drug addicts, and they lived homeless for a little while. And I was like, gosh, what would that be like? And so it just was a way to sort of refresh my whole outlook on my business rather than just closing it, which I absolutely wanted to do in the middle of COVID. Like, why are we doing this? We're just losing all the money that the government gave to us. But then somehow the business recovered. And somehow we started to find good people who wanted to work for us, which was surprising because we had some pretty bad people and some not so great people who worked for us in the past. And it was just, Utah Stories reemerged and kind of refreshed its whole identity post-COVID because of, I think, the homeless content we were doing and then our refound passion for what it was we were doing.
How many is in your team?
We have 4 full-time people, but we have about 8 really consistent good writers to pull from. Then we have 2 or 3 really great photographers, 2 illustrators. So it's not a big team. We're trying to hire a few more people. But we're being very, very picky about who we hire, which we were never that way so much in the past, because we have a really good company culture now. Everybody works hard. And so, the way I look at it now, I would love to see Utah Stories be the type of publication that produces a story every month that everybody has to read. Yeah. Like, you really feel like you're not in the loop if you're not reading Utah Stories or listening to our podcasts. And so we're trying to just elevate the level of quality, the level of journalism. I know we are looked down upon by the rest of the journalism community because we reported that homeless serial killer story. But we reported on it because the police would not speak with us. They were trying to intentionally cover that up what was happening, and we brought it to light. And so I'm proud that we were able to do that.
Is this still a thing? Is this still happening?
What is the homeless serial killer? There is a homeless serial killer, and it is
Here in Utah.
Yeah, and it is extremely cheap, abundant fentanyl that is killing the homeless all the time, every day. And it's not, and it's basically the Mexican drug cartel are bringing in these extremely cheap drugs, and they're all abundant and accessible. I don't think the police are able to contain that one bit because it is everywhere. And I think that is ultimately the serial killer, because there's no regulation, there's no stopping it, there's no checks. There's very few measures being taken to stop it.
Is there young kids in these communities? I don't in my poor experience, I don't think I ever seen kids. It's always adult people.
Yeah, you rarely see children out on the street. It used to be when the downtown road home shelter was open that had 1,000 beds. There was an area, I believe, that was dedicated to parents with kids.
Okay.
And there used to be buses that would pick them up. And but I think if you're a family, there's the family shelter out in Midvale, so you don't see them in downtown, and they'll hang out there. I've heard horrible things about that shelter too.
Really?
The kids just run amok, and there's no like curtailing the behavior of the children who are there. And so yeah, it's but the problem that I think usually happens when children are, victims of witnessing domestic violence, or their parents are drug abusers, is they'll be taken away for a while by DCFS. They'll be brought back, taken away, brought back, taken away, brought back. There's the Christmas box home, which is a place to take kids when the parents are just checked out. Our kids, before we got them, were there several times. And then eventually they'll end up as foster kids. And there's over 3,000 kids in foster care right now in Utah. And now we have a very good understanding of that whole system from what we've gone through. And it is extremely difficult. Kids who've suffered from trauma, who you're trying to do everything you can to help recover from the side effects of that trauma. And the system that's in place now is they want to keep all the siblings together.
Yeah.
And what we learned through 4 years of trial and error is it's far better to have two adults dedicated to one child when the kids are re-traumatizing each other constantly, because they learned at a very young age, how do you solve problems? Oh, you hit. Oh, how do you resolve your conflicts? Oh, you push and shove somebody aside and take what you want. And they retraining them to understand, no, that's not how you do it. You're far better off with one kid. But their golden rule in foster care is kids should always remain together. Siblings should always remain together. And so we dealt with three kids who were far better off apart, at least in the short term, to help them get over their trauma. And
so they're siblings?
Yeah.
How is that? How is just taking care of foster kids? I knew a friend that did it. I worked with him long time ago. And one of the things that he said, and it's kind of, now that I think about it, that was like kind of a shitty thing to say, but he was like, my wife and I always had foster kids. And then one thing he said, and we kill it on the taxes. I was like,
yeah,
okay.
Most people, well, that is the case. Most people do it for the money. I hate to say that, but when I was going to the training classes, I think a lot of
you get trained to be a foster parent?
Yeah, it's lot of training.
Oh, wow.
It took us a year to go through the training. And, but you see the people who are there, a lot of them are very poor. A lot of them are, just getting by. And, the family that had these kids before us, very, very nice family, but she called herself a professional that was her job. I mean, to take care of foster kids and then move them on to the next family and move them on. We went into it wanting to adopt, and we didn't need the financial assistance. It was helpful during COVID.
Yeah.
Like we probably would have had to actually give up the kids if we hadn't had the tax incentive and the check. So we had even more identification with foster parents during the middle of COVID. But it was impossible to have these kids behave well together because they had been completely traumatized. They had been living in complete dysfunction. They had been in and out of their parents' home because DCFS was getting them all the time. Their dad their mother had a restraining order against their father.
Oh, wow.
So it's like these broken families are the cause, and what we see out on the streets are the symptoms. You know, if you were to repair broken families, then you could repair the homeless problem that we've got.
So is your plan in your situation, I should say, are you just gonna raise them and they can move on,
We have 2 out of 3 still. I mean, my parents now have the oldest.
Okay.
And he's flourishing with them. Straight A student, great marks. One of these incredible rare success stories is the oldest. We now have just the youngest. Mm-hmm. She's now starting to do very, very well. She was just tested for gifted and talented for reading and math, and we read to her all the time.
Nice.
When we can focus just on her and not the conflicts that were arising between her and her brothers, we are able to just do so much more. Instead of policing nonstop, we can do parenting. And so my goal is to change the foster care system to help these kids recover when they first enter into the system before you try to find naive foster folks who either adopt right away, naively thinking they're going to solve the problems when they can't, and the kids are perpetrating on each other. Or have these be kids who are used by professional foster care people who are shuffled through the system, never adopted, age out of the system, become homeless people. You know?
I also work with another friend. This is further back, and his parents they used to take on a lot of foster kids, and as I worked with him, because we worked for years, but I the more I got to know him, he was like, oh. I was starting to get to know his family, and he was like, oh yeah, so those are my 2 sisters, and then this one, like so and so on the other side, she was adopted. She came to us being a foster kid, and then we just adopted her, and I was like, oh, I didn't know that you can. What is it? Are you just leasing a kid, and then all of a sudden you get to keep it?
We're adopting our daughter.
Oh, nice!
It's so awesome, and the oldest is actually being adopted by my parents. So
how does this work? So is your plan to do it again with more? Or?
I don't know. It depends on how things go. Like our sole focus is on her right now.
Okay.
I want to see her flourish and succeed, get on the right track. I always wanted to have 3 kids, but more important than that dream, I think, is just to see her succeed.
Yeah.
And to see the oldest, to see all of them succeed, even the middle one, sweetest, most awesome kid, now living with a different family. I so wanted to adopt all 3, but you need to consider what's in the best interest of the kid.
Yeah.
Now he's with just one father, one mother. He's doing better already.
So is it your choice when you want to adopt, or does the kid have an input too?
Yeah, the kid's always going to tell you what they think about things.
That's what I'm saying.
So it's like the kids always have wanted to be adopted by us, but when they were perpetrating against each other so often, I can't go into all the details.
No,
I will eventually, but there's a lot of details there. But we did finally get permission to be able to adopt the one girl right now. And my parents have permission to adopt the oldest, and the middle child, we'll see what'll happen to him, because he's probably the toughest out of all 3, but he's incredibly talented. He's the most incredible dancer.
Oh, wow.
Like he could go perform on the street right now and make a ton of money.
That's
He's
crazy.
8 years old. He can dance just like Michael
8 years.
Jackson. And he's like, he's got so many talents,
Yeah.
but he's so hard. And it's like you want to tap these talents and you want to help him succeed. But then he is like I think I read about what Bruce Lee was like.
Okay.
Bruce Lee got in a lot of fights. Nobody could control him. He was just out of control, but he was a great dancer and he was a great fighter. This is Bruce Lee at age 8. This kid, he's so incredibly talented.
How do
and
you
charismatic?
Where do you find time to do Utah Stories, where everything you got going? I mean, so you have your own business, plus you have the kids, and now you're knocking on doors and interviewing people and putting a whole show together. And
Yeah,
I mean, I'm thankful that you even have time to do this.
It's like you you find time somehow.
Yeah. By the
Yeah.
way, it's 1 o'clock in the morning today. I'm just kidding. Yeah. So when do you find? I don't have necessarily a plan. One of the advantages that I have now, and the guy that, like I said, my boss and the guy that I used to show with, he mentioned it just yesterday. It was like, you must be relieved that you don't have to wait for me now. It's like, I'm like, no, because for him it was like, we're recording this day from this time to this time, and that's it. Mm-hmm. Now on the other hand, I'm like I told you, it was like, well, it's the weekend, it's Saturday today, Saturday morning, and I have that flexibility where like, oh yeah, let's do it. That sounds good. Yeah.
Yeah, when you have a schedule, I think it's actually a lot better.
Yeah.
Like you're gonna record. We used to always record Thursday between 4 and 5. But when you don't, you're kind of like, okay, should I do it this week? Yeah. I got so many more important things I got to do. Maybe I shouldn't do it this week.
Yeah.
Like we didn't record anything last week because we were remodeling our office.
Oh, nice.
And so I told Allegra, keep doing your top 5. She's got her own podcast called The Top 5. It's cool. And then my podcast, we separated the two.
Okay.
Is I still haven't come up with a name. It's either going to be 5 questions, and it'll be 5 questions regarding to one topic I'm looking into, or it'll just be checks and balances, something like that. I don't know. We've got to come up with a good name.
I have seen the I'm quote unquote met Allegra through the video. Well, same with you, right? Through the videos, and she called me saying, my boss is down there. He's waiting for you to open the door. The door's locked. I was like, oh. Okay, I'll go get him.
I should have got your direct contact. Yeah.
So going back to this to the homeless community, which is something that you guys deeply focus on. Is there something as a reporter covering this community? Is this something that you have learned? Have they taught you something?
Oh yeah, for sure. It's interesting. Prior to COVID, the business was going in a complete different direction. We were having all these festivals. We had 3 festivals in 2019. We were trying to contact the elites to talk to more important, prominent people for the podcast, trying to get more politicians and famous people on the show. That's kind of how the regular route podcast game success is. You get better and better, more prominent guests. And then, then the rug is pulled out from under you and you're just like, oh, wow, now what? And so it was like you do what you can do to both succeed and thrive. And what I found right away is I was learning a lot from homeless people. Yeah. I was learning money and success and maybe fame is not any kind of road to happiness. It's where you gain and you feel good about yourself is through community. And every homeless person, most of them will tell you they're out there by choice. Like if you don't have a mom and a dad, a brother, sister, you're all alone. How good are you going to feel about yourself going to Walmart every day in an apartment you can barely afford and not being able to hang out with your friends, not being a part of a community? These people are part of a community, and they're very often a tight-knit community, and that is why they are out there. Yeah. And I realize I need to be a part of a community. Nobody can be on their own island and feel happy. you have to connect with people.
Yeah.
And so the podcast became about connecting with people. All our videos became about connecting with people. And we remembered that our festivals are all about connecting people, not trying to get these big sponsors, not trying to make tons of money. It's, if you don't have community, you're going to be miserable. And COVID and all of the deaths that happened from people in isolation, and all of the people who were, losing their mental stability and their mental health, that was because of lack of community. And so it really, talking to them, it really reinforced what's important. I think it is your connection with God too. Yeah. That became very important for me. Like, I think you've got to understand there is a higher power, and you've got to reach out to him and realize you really have no power. You need to connect with God when you feel at your lowest moments.
It's so funny now that you say that. I would think that someone that gets to that position, talking about, again, the ladder going down, hitting rock bottom or whatever, I would think that people just go, I don't believe in nothing anymore. Otherwise, I wouldn't be here. But you're saying it's the total opposite.
When you get down to it and you ask him, why don't you take that job at McDonald's? Yeah. Why don't you there's a place called Advantage Services. That guy was on our podcast. Rob goes to homeless camps and offers day jobs. You can get a day job, and you can I think you only earn $9 an hour, but you could go clean up some field out. He's contracted by the county and clean up homeless camps. Actually,
with us doing constructions, I know that there's with me doing construction for the longest time, I know that there's a company out there who hires people just to do, we call them flaggers, just to do this stop and go. Mm-hmm. And they're making about the same amount, but it's a place that you go to, and then when my company needs more flaggers than the ones we have, then we go through them, and then they're like, all right, they just go. And the way it works, they, at the end of the day, they will go with the foreman that's doing the traffic control, and then he gets to sign a paper that these guys have saying, oh, this person was here from this time to this time, and then they go and they get paid. But
yeah,
one of the cool things about it was, like I said, I was out in the field for the longest time. There's some people that they don't necessarily work in the company that you work for. They're like outsiders. Mm-hmm. They're just helping the company. But I got along with them perfectly. Mm-hmm. And they're just like, hey, what's going on? And every time I saw them, I was like, oh, so-and-so is here. And it so happens that you don't see that person for a while, because obviously he's helping different companies and different projects. But then with your company, you move to another project, and then all of a sudden that person goes back, and we're like, hey, and it was like, do you remember? And it was crazy. And I there was a bunch of times that I told them, why don't you just get a job with us?
Yeah.
Like, why don't you just do that? And some of them were like, because they belong with the I wouldn't say the homeless community, but they were in that kind of vibe of like, I don't want to be attached to something, I still want to be free and do that. But they some of them did. Some of them got a job with us, and some of them were like, I'm just good doing this. Yeah. It's like, it gives me enough money to survive. If I make more than that, I want to make stupid decisions. Mm-hmm. I was like, what a crazy way to see it.
It is, but you talk about the lunatic fringe. It's like, it has its appeal, and a lot of people actually like the lifestyle, and that's discredited by all the compassionate service groups. They think that they're just all victims, that they all can't do any better because maybe they have low IQs. No, there's a lot of brilliant people on the streets who are very, very smart, and you can learn that by just talking to them. Go get some stories, and you'll find they're former engineers, former mechanics who were really accomplished auto mechanics. A lot of them ran into pain pills where they had some injury. They got addicted to the pain medication. They could not get off. Then they got into heroin or whatever. And but then it's easier to do that. And what we should be asking ourselves is why are we making the ladder going down more appealing than the ladder going up? We should have more programs that help people get on the ladder going up. And the biggest missing rungs of the ladder are housing. You should be able to find cheap housing somewhere in the valley. There's plenty of empty lots all over the valley. There's no question we could put up. They have this pod thing. Have you know about that?
Mm.
So on, I think it's 600 west and about 400 south, not too far from here, maybe 300 south. There's these little pod things, like little mini houses, where they have 50 of them, and I think they were 10 grand each, and they put up 50 homeless people who would be otherwise on the streets, and that's run by Switchpoint, who makes people go out and work during the day. They don't let them sit around and use drugs all day. I know there's been a few problems because a lot of the homeless people who come in are totally addicted to drugs. But that's the way you do it. And you just make a mandate. You can stay here, you can get warm, you can get food as long as you're working, and you can pay rent, like pay a little bit of rent. And then people have the dignity of going to work every day. Even if it's only, if they have a injury and they can do very limited things, they could probably hold a flag for what you were saying, for a couple of hours at least.
Yeah.
They could maybe be a prep cook or a dishwasher for a local restaurant. And I think it's just changing this mindset of thinking these people are useless and worthless. They're the human trash. They're not. They can work. They can. Everybody can do a little bit of something to tap into their own human potential. And I think that's what our leaders aren't looking at. I think that's these work programs. That's how you gain human dignity.
You're the second person that I've had on the show that has a lot of knowledge about the community. I've never heard in interviewing, sitting down with you and sitting down with him, that there hasn't been a bad thing said about the community, homeless community. But do they have that one guy that happens to be mean or violent or?
Yeah. Well, yeah.
or the one that like, oh, that's why. Like if I think we let ourselves by the idea of that, like I mentioned earlier. But if we see that person, then we go, oh, that's why those guys. Right? Like, oh, see, that's why we don't like them, or that's why they're there, or whatever. But like I said, I don't see that a lot. Like I see maybe one walking by himself, and maybe they got kicked out of the community. But I don't see. I remember a few years ago, Pioneer Park used to be full with the community, right? There was like, and I remember driving by, and I go, oh, they're everywhere in here. And all of a sudden they got kicked out. But now I drive by there when I have to, and there's a person that is not always, but I've seen a person that is going above and beyond. Like he's screaming, he's doing this. There's another one that I see by Fifth South and the track by the tracks. So it's easier for me to say, oh, that's why he's in the street. And I'm guilty of that. Obviously, I judge. I go, oh, look at that guy. I'm like, oh, that's why they're there. That's why he belongs there. That's why. But I come to find out that's like literally the 1%.
Yeah, there's definitely. I'm glad you brought that up. There's definitely people in the homeless community who are there victimizing the homeless people, and who are violent and who are mentally ill. And I had Sim Gill on my program. He's the Salt Lake City District Attorney, so he's the one in charge of how law enforcement prosecutes criminals. And I told him about a guy who I happened to be downtown interviewing people around St. Vincent's Dining Hall and where the Road Home used to be. He had just struck 3 other homeless people in the head with a hammer, just like brutally smashed them in the head with hammers. And these were like old people. He had just gone berserk. And so I looked up his criminal history, and he had done this like 5 times before. He'd smashed his shopping cart into other homeless people. He'd thrown a rock at a police officer. And this guy's just like going around doing this. And I was like, Sim Gill, why is this happening?
Yeah.
How is this guy walking the streets? And the problem is the criminally insane, there used to be mental institutions for these people, and they would be committed. He told me they still commit people, but it's just like I think he said a pink slip or a yellow slip. You are committed as criminally insane, but there's nowhere to put them because all the beds are full for the people who are way beyond their mental stability is not good enough to be in a homeless shelter. It's not good enough to be in permanent supportive housing. It's not good enough to be anywhere. So they're just on the streets. And those people are scary. And they're victimizing other homeless people. And I believe if there have been murders, and it's not been one person as a serial killer, it's that these people go nuts and they kill other homeless people. And it makes the streets really scary. And so that reinforces the idea you need people around you who you can trust. And one camp I hung out in for quite a while in the middle of COVID, off North Temple, they were extremely suspicious of anybody coming near their camp who they didn't know. And there was a weird guy who came in their camp, and one guy was just like, "You get out of here. You're not coming near us." And the guy just wanted a place to stay. I was like, "Why do you not feel bad for him?" And he says, "He's bad news. I know he's got a screw loose. We're not letting him stay with us." And wow. And so they develop these communities where they protect each other. They watch each other's backs. Nice. One will have a dog. Typically, it's like a pit bull.
I was just gonna say that, man. When it's one thing that you see people, and you know they're trying to get by, but when you see a dog, that's where I go, oh man, like I'm actually
that dog has a very important job.
That's the bait, huh? Is that what happens?
Well, I guess it's a dual purpose.
Because I will say this, I mentioned this when we had the other show. One time we talked about, have you ever given money? Have you ever done? And I don't think I ever given money. But I have. What I have done is I saw one. I live in West Valley, and I went through like the what is it? The street mall that we have there, whatever. All the stores on 56 West are, and there was I went to buy me some food, and there was a person there that was asking for food, but he had a dog. I was like, oh god damn it! So I was like, and I ended up going to get my food, and I think I was buying like a small pizza or whatever, and I ended up buying another one. And I knew that I was buying it for the guy, but I make sure that when I gave him the pizza, I'm like, make sure your dog eats. Because that was like the reason I bought it. I was like, hey, just throw a slice to your dog. And he was like, oh, thank you so much. I think there was a guy when I drove by. When I left, it was a girl. So they're doing turns.
Yeah.
But I said, make sure your dog eats. And she's like, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, dogs get all my sympathy. My dogs. I'm not insane because of my dogs, for sure. And it's like dogs keep you in check. I got an Irish setter and a golden retriever.
Ooh, okay.
And my Irish setter he's the most incredible animal. He just loves these kids in our home. Yeah. He hugs them. He put his arm up on him. Nice. And he's a giant dog, but he's the most ultimate, amazing therapy dog.
I just saw. When I was married, we had 4 dogs. The 2 of mine were Rottweilers. I had a male and a female. Now, speaking of your son dancing like Michael Jackson, the female was Billie Jean and the male was Jackson. So you know where I'm going with this.
Nice.
They obviously it was a few years ago, right? So that we put him down. They passed away. It's been a few years now. But yesterday, I have a friend who started a business of cleaning dog shit. Like he would go to your house and clean it for you, and he's actually killing it because people are like, I don't want to do that.
Yeah.
And he's going from house to house, and obviously he has like a contract or whatever, however he's doing it, but he's making money. And he posted a picture of a Rottweiler yesterday, a female, and it's like this big, and it's like someone just left her in one of my clients' yard. They were like, here, you take care of it. And I'm telling you, after being married with kids and the dogs and everything, now I leave alone. I was like, I would take this dog in a heartbeat just because it's a Rottweiler, the ones that I used to have. And it's a female, which was like my first dog was a female. But because of the same reason that I'm alone, I'm out of the house 20 or not 20, but 10 plus hours a day. So it's like, it's not a good fit for me. Like I said, there's nobody in the house when I'm not there. So, but it's the damn dog. I go, oh
yeah. Man. The dogs just make you feel so much happier because they're so happy to see you.
And also after losing my dogs, I said to myself, I don't think I'll ever like get me a dog that I have to go out of my way to get. I'll just go to the pound. Like, there's a lot of,
our first two dogs were rescue dogs.
But I'm telling you, I saw that dog and I was like, there was like a split second in my head. I'm like, how can I make this happen?
Yeah.
Just because
you can just take it to work with you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, the dog.
It's like there's this. I was always kind of amazed. No More Homeless Pets, Utah. Like, and they pretty much accomplished this. There's no home. There's homeless dogs living with homeless people.
Yeah.
But the homeless people will do everything to help their dogs.
Yeah.
And we have so much compassion for animals because if they've come from a traumatic environment, of course we understand. Yeah. But we don't have that same compassion for humans. I bet all these people, I mean, most of them have been traumatized, and they're trying to get over it. They're trying to figure out how do I deal with life and all the struggles.
Yeah.
And it's just like studying it as long as I have. You see what works, you see what doesn't work, and you're just wondering, why aren't we doing the damn things that work?
Yeah.
Gosh, it's just frustrating.
Well, listen, we're coming up on we're a little over an hour. I don't want to take too much of your time because the main reason is I want you to come back.
Yeah, I'd love to. I'd love to have you on my podcast.
Yeah, for sure, absolutely. Yeah. Before we go, just give me a little rundown of what's the future. What's the future for Utah Stories? What's the future with? Are you still interviewing homeless? And I understand the reason of doing it is because of the serial killer, but you're still interviewing him, and what for? I mean, what route are you going?
Yeah. So about a year and a half passed after the Soul Serial Killer episode, and we did a documentary last year. Mm-hmm. We premiered it at Broovies.
Okay.
I basically helped produce it. I had another director, another guy who did all the work, and it was his film. It wasn't my film, but we premiered it at Broovies, and I was very happy to back that film project and have the podcast continue. I kind of got away from it because I lost a lot of money producing that film and going that direction for so long. So for about 5 months, I wasn't covering any homeless stuff. But then, I had Rocky on the podcast talking about it. And then recently I've been going out talking to more homeless people because I just can't get away from it. It's like you want to do something that matters in the community, in the world. And that.
But is this about the same subject?
Yeah, it's not about, it's more about how we go about financing the things that work. So I'm trying to take in a bigger picture, like how do we get money that actually goes toward helping the homeless people rather than turning them into dependents, and move that money to the programs that work, like the In-Between, Switch Point, Other Side Academy. Other Side Academy is luckily pretty well financed, and they're doing very well, but the In-Between helps people who have severe illnesses who are homeless get recovery. They need more money, and it's like, so I'm basically kind of looking at more the state legislature level, the political level of homelessness. That's what I want to do in the next few months, and then I'm working on a whole project with the foster care system. Sharing what I've gone through, seeing if more families have gone through the same thing. I didn't share all those details on this show because I just can't at this point.
No,
but
absolutely.
There's a lot of details where it's been incredibly disheartening to see how the system treats both the kids and the parents when problems are arising between kids. So I will be working on that a lot. But we also have a revenue director at Utah Stories. We have a sales director.
Nice.
We want to make it the most prominent, most read magazine in Utah. We want to have a story every single month that everybody needs to read. The current issue, everybody should read the story following the money of failed homeless housing projects and who's getting rich off those projects. That was our big feature story in our April issue. In May, we have a big feature story about why affordable housing is not being built, who's preventing it, because it absolutely could be built if we change zoning laws. So that's a big investigation.
Do you have a certain date when the magazine comes out? Or?
So our May issue opening up the question of why affordable housing is not being built, that is going to be out a week from yesterday.
Okay.
So we're sending it to Press Monday. It's going to come out, I think that's May 7th.
Mm-hmm.
And then just want to keep doing journalism that makes a difference, that, opens up the corruptive powers in Utah. There's a lot of corruption in Utah.
I know there's so many underground stories of Utah that is just like, I have a friend that it's she's a sex educator, and she tells me some things that I'm like, what? Here? Yeah. I also work with a friend, and this is completely going off subject, but he was attending the quote unquote parties. That's what they call them, parties.
Oh,
when
yeah.
they all get together.
Mm-hmm.
And like sometimes he would give me details and I'm like, what, here? He's like,
that's
yeah,
a big story that
He's
hasn't
like,
been covered. Oh my gosh.
Dude, I'm dying.
They're crazy.
He was
parties
like,
going on.
he was like, if I told you the people that I get to see, you'll be blown away. And I was like, but anyway, that's the story for another episode. Here's your camera. Tell everybody where they can find you. They can find Utah Stories, all about you, and then we'll get out of here.
Yeah, Utah Stories. You can find it at utahstories.com. We have a storytelling contest in a couple of weeks at a brand new Dolly Crepes out on Fort Union. And check out utahstories.com, the magazine, or the website to learn more about that. It's you can win $100 with the best story, and we find we get some really great stories, and if they're good enough, we'll also put them in the magazine. And we want to encourage everybody to come out to that. It's $10, and you get crepes when you come, and you also support our journalism by supporting that. And we have membership options on the website. You can become a member for $5 a month, or get a subscription for as little as $3 a month, or subscribe to our free digital newsletter that we send an email every week.
Nice.
Yeah.
Is that all?
That's about it.
You can find the show at How Did It Get So Good on Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube. You can also find me at Ange Cervera on Instagram, Angel Cervera on Facebook, and that's my last name, Cervera. Once again, thank you so much. Nice meeting
thanks,
you,
Angel.
and hopefully we'll do this again.
Yeah,
sometime.
for sure.
And this has been How Did It Get So Good? Thank you.